Stay with us, this gets deeper. Did you know that some of the earliest and most accurate maps of Africa were drawn by Africans? For centuries, the narrative of African history has been shaped by outsiders, often portraying the continent as a blank slate, ripe for discovery. But the reality is far more complex and fascinating. This is the story of African cartography, a story of sophisticated knowledge, erased histories, and the ongoing effort to reclaim Africa's rightful place on the map. We often think of maps as objective representations of the world, but they are also powerful tools that reflect the perspectives and priorities of those who create them. European maps of Africa, for example, were often designed to serve colonial interests, emphasizing resources and territories while neglecting the complex social and political realities of the continent. But before the arrival of Europeans, African societies had developed their own unique systems of mapping and spatial knowledge. These maps weren't always drawn on paper or parchment. They might be etched into rock, woven into textiles, or even passed down orally through generations. Think of the intricate trade routes that crisscrossed the Sahara Desert, connecting West Africa with the Mediterranean world. These routes were, but here's what they never wanted you to know. Not just lines on a map. They were living networks of relationships, knowledge, and exchange, meticulously maintained by Berber and African traders. Or consider the sophisticated navigation techniques used by sailors along the East African coast, who relied on their understanding of the stars, winds, and currents to travel vast distances across the Indian Ocean. Even within specific African societies we see map usage. The Kingdom of Congo, for example, had well-defined administrative boundaries. While physical examples are scarce, descriptions from the time indicate an appreciation for accurately defining their territory. The Mali Empire's influence spread over, stay with us, this gets deeper. A large area. Oral traditions and descriptions point to an understanding of the relative locations of important cities and resources, even if a formal map wasn't created. The Dogon people of Mali, famous for their astronomical knowledge, also have a rich understanding of their local geography, reflected in their art and rituals. European colonization had a devastating impact on African cartography. Colonizers often dismissed or suppressed indigenous knowledge systems, replacing them with their own maps and surveys. This led to the erasure of African perspectives and the imposition of a European worldview. These European maps weren't just about documenting territory. They were tools of control. They allowed colonial powers to divide and conquer, to exploit resources, and to impose their own systems of governance. The Berlin Conference of 1884–85, where European powers carved up Africa among themselves, is a stark example of this. The maps used at that conference were not neutral representations of reality. They were instruments of power, used to justify the partitioning of an entire continent. But the story of African cartography doesn't end with colonialism. Today, African scholars and activists are working to reclaim their cartographic heritage, rediscovering and reinterpreting ancient maps, and creating new maps that reflect African perspectives and priorities. This is a story of resilience, of knowledge that has survived despite attempts to erase it. It's a story of the ongoing struggle to decolonize knowledge and to reclaim control over how Africa is represented in the world. It's a story of a continent that has always been mapped, always been known, always been understood, but whose own understanding has been too often ignored. The challenge now is to ensure that African voices are heard, that African perspectives are valued, and that African knowledge is used to shape the future of the continent. Subscribe to Punai Afrik for more African history and wealth wisdom. Follow for more untold African stories.